All right, it's noon. Kim, I'm unmuting you so you can talk.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Lunch and Learn series hosted by VAPMA in partnership with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. I'm Dr. Kim Hutchinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Farmers Market Association. The Virginia Farmers Market Association is an organization that works with over 356 plus farmers markets across the state of Virginia to provide them with education, training, and resources in order to make farmers markets in Virginia sustainable businesses. We are thrilled to be working with Sarah Sharpe and having her hosting this session, Marketing You and Your Product. This is a continuation of a training program that we started back in the spring of this year, where we brought vendors together to have one-on-one and opportunities to learn about a variety of different topics that impact you and your business. And from that one-day training session that we held, these were the topics that vendors, producers, farmers, and market managers said were of most importance to them. And so we are very grateful to Sarah and her team who have agreed to come in and work with us on this Lunch and Learn series. So at this time, I will turn it over to Sarah. There is a chat box at the bottom of your screen. Please use that in order to ask any questions during the presentation, and we will make sure that we get those to Sarah. Mary, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And thank you again for joining us.
All righty. Are you ready for me, Mary?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Myself.
Wonderful. So as Kim said, my name is Sarah Sharpe, and I am the Agriculture and Natural Resources Agent in Greene County, which is just north of Albemarle, so just north of Charlottesville, for those of you. That's normally the first question I get when I tell people that I am in Greene. But just a little bit about my background so that people aren't like, why isn't it an ag agent talking about marketing? What does she know? So a little bit about me. I actually grew up going to farmers markets. So I've been going to farmers markets for over 20 years now. My family has a meat business. So I tell people that while my friends in elementary school were going to Little League games on Saturday mornings, I was at the farmers market writing receipts and bagging products and making change. So I grew up doing that, and my family's business has expanded since then. And then once I graduated from college, I farmed for a little bit and also started a pick your own pumpkin patch on my family's farm. So as we talk about marketing, I have a little bit of experience in a lot of this that I'm going to be talking about. And also, as Kim said, I am lucky enough, I have 2 screens in my office. So I like for this to be a little bit of an interactive type presentation. And so if you are welcome to submit comments and questions, and I can see those as they are submitted as we do this. So first off, if I can make it work. There we go. Marketing, and the definition of marketing is just defined as putting the right product in the right place at the right price at the right time. And so marketing, it is kind of one of those things that can be a little big as we look at it and as we think about it, but we have to break it down, which is something hopefully I'll help with today, so that we can really think through this and help you do a little bit of a better targeted approach at marketing yourself and your products, because those are 2 things that are very different and very important. So the first thing that we need to think about is, what is your market? So what is the product that you're going to be selling? How are you going to price it? And Rachel, she will talk through some of that pricing and a really great way to think through that. And as we know, we really need to look at our budgets and make sure that our prices are matching that so that we can make money. We need to think about the place. So where are we going to sell it? How are we going to market it? And that kind of goes in line with the promotion part too. What's the best way to promote yourself and the best way to promote your products? Who are you going to sell it to? So at farmers markets, we are very lucky that we have a really wide variety of things that are being sold, whether that be produce, whether that be jams, jellies, baked goods, bath bombs, you name it, we can find it at a farmer's market. But we have to make sure we're thinking about our target audience as we do this. How are you going to sell it? So that place, is it going to be at a farmer's market? Are you going to look at some different avenues down the road? And in what form are you going to sell it? Are you going to have that raw commodity? Are you going to have, you know, some value added? How are you going to get your product to that consumer? How involved do you want to be? And that is really important, and we'll talk about that as we talk about some of the different marketing options that we have available, because we need to think about how involved you want to be, and the next bullet of your time and commitment and your time ability. What does your schedule really look like? If you're working a full-time job as well as doing a farmer's market business on the side, what really realistically do we need to think about for a time commitment? If you're trying to work a job and have a family and do farmers markets, exactly what are you going to be able to do? So first off, just to talk a little bit about the markets that are available. This is something that I've done in some other presentations. It works really well as an interactive conversation, which is why I kind of mentioned that earlier. But here, I mean, I think it's really great if we think about the pros and cons. So I'll give everybody a minute if you want to just type in some pros of farmers markets and some cons of farmers markets that you see. And I'll stop talking and let people type. Yeah, so feel free to keep typing. I'll read through some of these answers. The pros, we get to know the customer, is that ability to sell directly to the consumer, having FaceTime with the consumer, provide place where the customers can come versus building your own store, absolutely, and we will talk about that. And of course, we have competition from other sellers, testing out products, exactly. Yeah, all those are great. Yes. No control over how many people will be there and what to do with leftover perishables. Yes, absolutely. So, you know, when we think about this direct to consumer and thinking about the farmers markets, it's really great. You normally can get some higher prices versus some of the other marketing avenues that we may look at, because we are selling directly to the consumer. We don't have to go through a middleman. A pro, it's good if you like people. I tell people that if you are not a people person, if you do not like dealing with the public, then farmers markets probably are not the correct place for you. You've really got to be willing to get out there and talk to people and talk about your product, talk about you. And, you know, for a lot of these farmers markets, that is a pro, is that if you are a vegetable producer and there are 15 other vegetable producers out there, you know, thinking about how to sell yourself, because everybody's going to have sweet corn and green beans. So what do you do to make sure that those people are coming back to see you? And that's what's great about farmers markets, is really working on that relationship building. It's really great for something if you have a lot of something or a small amount of something. You can run specials to get rid of a lot of something. Or if you have small quantities, it's that really great way you can say, I've only got 5 jars of strawberry rhubarb jelly today. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so that also helps create that sense of urgency that people may want. The flexibility of product offerings, and I think somebody kind of said that, in this way of being able to test out products with real-time feedback. That's one thing that my dad really did a lot of at the farmers market, was anytime that we brought out some sort of new type of sausage or something, you know, you could give it out to some of those customers that you knew would give you some really great feedback, and they could give you some honest feedback about whether, yes, you should sell this is amazing, or no, you need to go back and tweak your recipe and try again. And I think something else that we really need to think about, especially in today's world of agriculture and consumerism, is that we are able to better educate the public with these farmers markets, because we are able to have that FaceTime with those consumers to talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Going into cons, somebody typed in the location of the market and the attendees not being my target customer. Absolutely. You know, I think that one thing that we talk about is that and I may talk about here or somewhere else, that we really have to think about the location and thinking about when we look at DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. versus the farmers market here in Stainersville. You know, you're going to get a whole lot more people in DC, and is that your target customer versus a very small local farmers market? So you really have to think about that as you're trying to decide what farmers market you want to attend. Make sure you're visiting those farmers markets before you go, to see who's there, to see what other people are there as well. Farmers markets are a really big time commitment, especially, you know, you think about it, you've got to get your vehicle packed up either first thing in the morning or the night before. So that's hours that you may be spending getting ready. Then you have the time actually at the farmer's market, get everything set up, selling while you're there, packing up, and then unpacking when you get home. If you're a livestock producer, that makes it pretty tough by the time you pack up, and then you still have animals to feed when you get home from the farmer's market. You know, it is that really big time commitment that we do have to think about. Is the rate of return worth it for you? And that's something that you have to decide. Some of those cons, and especially we're seeing it as these grocery stores are including more and more local products in their direct offerings, is that those prices at the farmer's market are a lot higher than they are at the grocery store some of the time. And as you see people, and I've heard it over and over again, you see people walk through, you see them look at your price board, and I don't know if they think we can't hear them or what, but you know, they'll say, oh, I can get such and such for $1 cheaper a pound at Wegmans. And that can be really frustrating, because that's the whole point of a farmer's market, is being able to come and interact with you. Again, you have to like people. You have to be willing to interact and talk with them. If, you know, I tell a story that there was a guy who used to sit up kind of diagonally across from us, and he would sit in a chair with a newspaper the whole time he was there, and then complain that he had no sales. Well, as we all know, nobody is going to come, you know, if you don't look like you want to be engaged, then people are not going to engage with you. And people can get really upset if you run out of products or don't have products. And sometimes it's part of that education too, where people want peaches in May. Well, there's a reason that we don't have peaches in May in Virginia if you're at a producer-only market. And so sometimes there's a little education that comes along with that as well. So then we look at starting up a farm stand or store. So you've been super successful at the farmer's market, and you start thinking about, okay, what's next? So we start thinking about a farm stand. So I'll give you just a minute to type in some things that you think could be pros or cons for a farm stand or store.
Sarah, it looks like Diane has her hand raised.
Oh,
Diane,
I can't see that.
let me see if Diane, are you able to unmute yourself? Maybe she doesn't really have her hand raised.
Okay.
Or I'm not sure how to unmute her. It's not letting me. Oh, okay. She says, sorry, I don't have a
Perfect.
comment.
Yes, okay, so some of the comments for these are so true. We have total control of the venue layout, farm smells, especially if you're selling baked goods, absolutely no direct competition from other sellers. Farm stand can be closer to home, have to generate your own traffic and have to staff at the stand at wide range of hours, have to pay for and maintain the farm store. Yes, absolutely, all of that. So running an agritourism operation the month of October, I certainly can see all of this. It's really nice that it's right there. So you think about your time and some of the less cost, which is kind of a give and take, but we think about there's often less mileage than if you're traveling 3 hours each way to go to a farmer's market, mileage, gas, your time, etc. But then we think about the cons that come across with that because you are open a little more. But some of the other pros is you can have people on that farm or that store so they can see where the products are raised. So if you're selling baked goods and you start a bakery, yes, having people be able to come in and smell those cinnamon rolls or smelling that apple pie that's just out of the oven, that is a sale in and amongst itself. If you have, if you're doing produce and you have some sort of little pick your own area so people can really get out and truly experience that farm experience, you can set the hours. So if you only want to be open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you can do that. If you want to be open every day of the week, you can do that. So if you are, if it's July and you're harvesting every single day, then you have an avenue for that produce to be able to go every single day. If you're baking every day, again, you can do that. You can be open all year, or you can be thinking about, how, if you just want to do seasonally, that's perfectly fine too. If you are thinking about some cons, is that people don't adhere to those set hours. People may show up to your farm whenever they want to buy and to visit the farm. They don't think through this. They just think that your store is available all the time. So they could just show up on a Sunday afternoon expecting to buy something when you aren't open. We also have to think about regulations and zoning. You have to think about, is your farm zoned this way? And making sure that we're working with the counties for this. If you do need employees, we have to think about paying those as well as making sure that we're getting good employees, because that can really make or break your business. Looking at a CSA, and CSAs can absolutely be integrated into a farmer's market. There are some vendors who may offer a farmer's market as a CSA pickup, but thinking about some pros and cons of this, and I'll give you just another minute just to think about some pros and cons of that CSA. Just in the interest of time, I'll keep going. So thinking about a CSA, you do have that the buyer pays up front, and you can have that money to work with at the beginning of the season. So if you are doing a farmer's market and a CSA in conjunction, you have that money to work with as you're buying seeds when you really need that money, like Rachel was talking about last week when we think about budgeting and making sure that we have our money flow. You can be flexible in the offerings of the product, which is great if you're growing all season, if you have a high tunnel, if you're able to diversify some of that produce offerings throughout. And this is a great way if you're thinking about a CSA, and it may be, since I know some farmers markets do not allow farmers markets as a CSA pickup, but it can be another great way to get people to come, because if they're there picking up their CSA, they may want to go buy baked goods, or they may want to go work with a meat. So reading through some of these comments, they're farmers, so going back to agritourism, there are farmers here that do agritourism. I love it for a special event, but for regular shopping, it's usually too out of the way for me to visit. Time and convenience for us city folk, absolutely. Same thing with a CSA. Many farmers do pickups at their farm or deliveries directly to consumer. I feel deliveries to consumer is too much for the farmer to offer. I believe pickups at farmers markets and local businesses is best. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where you can really integrate with a farmer's market when it comes to this. Thinking about the amount of product, you know how much you need to provide. You know how much you need to grow when it comes to this. Looking at some cons from those CSAs, do you have enough to fill a box? Can you partner with another farm? Can you use another farmers market vendor that you could create some sort of co-box to be able to do this? You want to make sure that you're building interest in your CSA, but not overselling. And that is where it gets really important. I've seen people who come in their first year, they want to sell 100 shares of a CSA. And I am of the firm belief that it's much better to start small and then grow as you're able, so that you do keep happy customers. And just if you are a meat producer, there's not a whole lot of meat CSAs out there that I'm aware of, but I think that is growing. We do have mail order. I'll go through this just in the interest of time pretty quickly. Mail order, I think, is really hard, especially it's kind of different if you have perishable versus non-perishable items. It's a great way to get your product to a large area. You can advertise in a larger area, but then sometimes that can be a struggle to manage. And if you are located in a rural area and there aren't a lot of farmers markets, or you need another way to get your items out there, it can be a good way to get some of that out. When we think about cons, it does take a really long time to grow any sort of mail order business, because it's not like you have that opportunity with consumers on a weekly basis to get in front of them so that they can enjoy your product. If you are doing perishables, baked goods, mail order vegetables, I don't think would be quite practical, but I'm sure it can be done, as some of these meal kit companies are showing. But thinking about that summer heat, shipping is expensive and getting more expensive all the time. And it also can be very expensive to maintain a website, any sort of storage, etc. And then thinking about wholesale. So if you have, and I get a lot of these questions, people who are growing for a farmer's market, all of a sudden they have a ton of one type of product that they want to get rid of. So their peppers did amazingly, and all of a sudden they have, you know, bushels and bushels that they need to get rid of that they know they can't sell at the farmer's market. So they come to me and they say, okay, where can I go to get rid of all of these peppers? And they say, you know, so they go out and they find a restaurant and they want to get rid of them. It's a great way to get rid of a large amount of volume at one time, especially if you can work with someone who is okay working with you, that wants local products, that can take one big amount at one time. It is great if you aren't such a people person, because you don't have to deal quite so much with the consumer. And if you do get more into wholesale, you can look at how it can be pre-ordered. And the problem with some of these wholesale accounts is they may not pay quite as quickly. And if they may order at the last minute. And the biggest thing that I hear when I talk to restaurants who really want to buy local products, is that it's a very frustrating because there's no price differential between a wholesale account and selling at the farmer's market. So you do have to think about that should you decide to do more wholesale sales. If you are thinking about this, just make sure that you know or have some idea of what you're getting into. Make sure you have an availability sheet of when things would be available. Make sure that you're representing yourself well, that you have all those details worked out, and make sure that you know how much you're capable of producing if you are getting into those bigger sales. So thinking about that, you just want to think that farmers markets are great. They're wonderful. As we talked about, there's lots of pros and cons to them, but we have a lot of times, and some of the wholesalers that I work with will tell you that, thinking about a mix of all these different ways of selling products is the best way to sell, just because it helps limit some of that risk that you may have in your business. So going on to looking at marketing your product. So how are you going to set yourself apart? How are you going to make sure that you are setting yourself apart from that other baked goods person that's at the farmer's market with you, or that other produce person? Are you going to be super friendly? Are you going to make sure that you are really talking about this story behind your farm? Are you going to tell them that you are a 7th generation farmer on your family's land? How are you going to make yourself different? What's your 30-second elevator speech that you can give to someone to really very concisely tell them who you are, and why you're doing what you're doing? Who is your target audience or consumer, and how are you going to reach out to them? Making sure that we think about a lot of these, each farmer's market may have a different audience and consumer. So making sure that we are really reaching that consumer that is at that farmer's market. And making sure that your marketing tactics are going to reach your target audience. So if you are a believer of Facebook ads, how are you going to make sure that those people that you are paying Facebook to give your ads to are actually getting those ads there? Who is your competition? And this kind of goes back to, how are you going to set yourself apart? How are you different from them? I am a firm believer that we need to talk about the positives about ourselves and not put down our competition. So, and sometimes people will come up and they'll say something negative about another vendor at the farmer's market. And the best thing you can do is not get into that and just talk about the pros of yourself. Thinking about marketing, you're going back to seasonality. If you are selling, we want to make sure that we're really thinking about our income and making sure that our money stream is going on, that we can manage it well. So how are you going to sell in the off season if you do have a product that isn't perishable? So you're not just growing vegetables. How are you going to make sure that you can still get that product out there? Because those bath bombs, you can stop making them, but that will help your money flow if you can continue. But making sure, so that's where we may look at some of those other avenues of marketing that we discussed. Maybe it's talking to another farm stand that's open year round, or it's having some sort of online sales presence so you can still sell. Thinking about insurance, making sure that you do have insurance. I know that some farmers markets require it and some don't. I, again, am a firm believer that insurance can be a very good friend of yours. Should anything ever happen, which we definitely hope that it never will, but you always just want to be protected through that. Are you going to have a specialty product? So that goes back to, how are you different? So just making sure that your product, if you do call yourself a specialty product, really having that story behind it to really talk about why it's so special. I'm sure that many of you already have gotten this far, but looking at naming your business. So if you do come up with a new business, thinking about naming it. When we think about it, how many Spring Valley or First river or come up with it, farm names do we have? There are a ton of them. So making sure that you're really giving yourself a unique or a clever name that you can really use as that marketing tool that people can recognize. And so that they really associate that with you, so that it is uniform, so that people just that immediate brand recognition, like Kleenex or Starbucks. We think about that is a just well-known name that everybody knows when we talk about. And so making sure that you have that as well. Logos and packaging, which I will talk a little bit about this next week, but thinking about, if you haven't already, create a logo that will set you and your farm apart. Making sure that then you do advertise it everywhere. So you have a banner up at the farmer's market that will really have that logo that you advertise, that people see and they immediately know that it's you. There's some great, lots of great people out there who can design this for you. And I definitely recommend that. If you don't have that skill set, there's some wonderful graphic artists out there who can do a great job of this for you. Packaging can be a little bit limiting depending on what you have available. And thinking about, if, for example, if we're looking at food safety, if you're a produce grower, we have to think about that packaging that we're using and making sure that it is safe. Depending on how you're planning to sell or want to sell in the future, you may or may not have to have a barcode. And thinking about having that consistent look. So whether that's coming up with a consistent color scheme, whether it's putting that logo on everything that you have, some way that you can make sure that you are branding and having your farm, your business, really a universal way to make sure that people can recognize it. So then we think about promotion. And this is where it can get pretty hard because there are so many different options out here for promotion. So as we all know, word of mouth is definitely the number one way that promotion happens. If people have a great experience, they're going to tell everybody. And if people have a negative experience, they're going to tell even more people. So making sure that we really are offering the best experience that we can, because that's the best advertisement that we can have for ourselves. Social media, man, we can offer 5 different classes on social media because those options are so many. And, I think that each of those that I have listed up here, you get into a whole other subset of advertising within those. Like Facebook has their own Facebook ads manager for getting in and advertising. But then we also have to think about that. There's some maintenance that comes along with all of those. A farm blog. So I was bound to determine that I wanted to start a farm blog. And I quickly realized that is just not one of my fortes. It's about time. And so that's why at the bottom, I put that whatever you do, do it well, because I think that if you're going to do a farm blog, or you're going to do a Facebook account, or you're going to do a Twitter, we have to be consistent in it. Especially when we think about those advertising, you want to make sure that if you're on social media, that you're getting across your customers' social media accounts on a regular basis. So they know who you are, they know where you are, they know where to find you on a Tuesday night or a Saturday morning, making sure that and it's a great way to also get some good education, to get people a behind the scenes look so they feel like they're more invested in you and your business. If you're doing baked goods and you can do a Facebook Live of icing cinnamon rolls, I mean, think about all the advertisement that just goes in there. You are really playing on so many different senses for those people to drive them your way. Newspaper, radio, TV. I think some studies are out there that this may be it's still worthwhile, but you have to think about the prices that go along with that, and whether that's really going to be useful to you. For example, does your target audience read the newspaper? Does your target audience listen to the radio, or are they listening to Sirius XM every day on their commute? Do they watch TV, or have they completely gotten rid of their TV and they're only watching shows on Hulu? So that's where it really is helpful to do some research and kind of know your target audience. Thinking about that promotion. So how much do you want to spend, and how can you get the most bang for your buck? Making sure that those advertising dollars go a far way, or pretty far when we think about it. So we also need to sit down and do our budget. Like Rachel says, everything goes back to budgeting. Making sure that we are thinking about how much do we want to spend, how much can we afford to spend, and getting the most bang for our buck. How do we make sure that our advertising is actually working? One thing that I do is that we just ask people, hey, how did you find out about the pumpkin patch? Google is amazingly a lot of times the very first answer, which when you have an ad budget and you're paying for advertisements is a little frustrating, because the money that you're paying, the advertising you're paying for, may or may not be doing it. But it is a great way to really promote customer retention. If we have that, we're doing Facebook ads to draw them in. And then if you have that really active social media account, it's a great way to really keep those people invested in you. Pricing. You have to know your cost. And I'm pretty sure Rachel's going to do a much bigger talk on this later. If you start out and you set them too high, yes, you can lower them. But if you've been at the farmer's market and you come in with prices that are too high, then it's very hard if you've scared off that consumer to get them back sometimes, because they've already gotten that impression in their minds that you are too expensive for them to shop at. But then we think about, if it's too low, man, it's hard to raise those prices later. So that's where, if you have a good budget and you really know what your break even is, then you can set those prices and you feel confident in those prices, because no matter what, we're always going to have people that are going to like or not like our prices. In the same day, you may hear, wow, this is a great price for this. And then the next customer may come in and say, oh my gosh, you're charging how much for that pie? So it really, you can never please anyone, but you want to make sure that you can be really confident in your prices. Where you're selling can also determine some of those prices. Thinking about a really urban area where people have a higher cost of living, they're much more accustomed to paying more at the farmer's market versus those that may be in a more rural area where you're competing with the local food lion. So really keeping all of that in mind as we're going through this. So, does anybody have any questions, any comments? Perfect.
Sarah, since we have a few more minutes, do you mind sharing sort of what types of things do you spend marketing dollars on, or put even an investment of time for the pumpkin patch and your?
Yeah, absolutely. So both the pumpkin patch and my parents' business, we found that Facebook ads are actually where we get the most return for our buck. So again, this is a whole other webinar, Facebook, all on its own. But basically the other thing we have to think about with Facebook is that as you grow your audience, the amount of money that you have to spend to get the same amount of reach also increases. So if you only have 200 people who like your page, you can get a whole lot farther with $20 than you can if you have 2,000 people who like your page. I started out, I did newspaper ads, I did radio ads, I tried a blog for a little bit, and the newspaper and radio ads absolutely did not pay for themselves at all. Google is really, I get a lot of people who say they just found me on Google. I get a lot of people who say that they saw that their friend tagged the pumpkin patch in one of their posts. So that goes back to that sort of word of mouth. I guess it's the online word of mouth that's out there that has worked really well. I know that, and it depends. So I also have talked to a farm store that I work with, and they sponsored some of the weather reports, and they said that they got really great response to that. So it kind of goes back to knowing your target audience. So he was closer to Fredericksburg and could hit some of those weather, or maybe he was doing traffic reports, one or the other, but he could hit those people that were commuting home from DC, because everybody wants to know what the traffic's going to be like on 95 at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where he could really draw people in that way.
Yeah, that's great. And it's what social media is what we've heard from others too, that's right now delivering better than other, more traditional advertising.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think there's been I know I've read research that radio is one of the most expensive ways to advertise, and it's not necessarily at all getting people their returns that they're putting in on it.
And it makes me think, I assume everybody's doing this, but if you're not, Google your business and see what's coming up. And because I've heard time and again from people that, like, you may change your hours or your location or something else, and it's not reflected on the Google summary of your business. So you want to make sure the website is up to date and the information is up to date.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get control of it, because sometimes customers will just go in and add their own information, and it may be wrong.
Yeah, and make sure you have those Google reviews that can be written on you. Make sure you have a thick skin, but some of those can be some really informative ways to get feedback on your business.
So true. Any other questions from anybody? Well, Kim, I'm going to unmute you and see if we oh, you've got it.
Oh, thank you. Sarah, thank you. It was very informative. It was very easy to follow, and a lot of tremendous information, especially for those that are starting out. I think there were some great tips and tools in there on, pieces that they can do to move forward. And thank you so much. I appreciate it. And for all of you that joined us today, I really appreciate your participation in the Lunch and Learn series. If you have comments that you'd like to forward to Mary or myself, or recommendations as to other topics, in addition to the ones that we will continue to be presenting that we've advertised through this series, please send me that information, and we will look at pulling together speakers for it. Again, thank you, Sarah, for all of the work that you and your partners do at the Extension in order to provide programs and services that support farmers that are, in our case, producers at our farmers market. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And everybody, if you haven't heard already, we have an annual conference in November 13th through 15th in Stanton. So check out our website, bafma.org, bafma.org.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.